Welcome to Ask Me Anything, featuring spiritual medium and psychotherapist Kelly White.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Ask Me Anything with me, Kelly White, spiritual medium. So nice to be on today, and we have a really special day today. It's very exciting, very exciting. But first, I'm going to say hello to a few people, and then I'll do the astrology. But hello, Stacy Thompson. So daffodils and tulips in bloom. Where are you, honey? I love daffodils and tulips. Oh my gosh. And I'm waiting for everything to come up here. Hey, Kathy Strout from Maine. Great place. Hey, Julie West. Hey, Jacqueline. Happy Thursday to you. Hey, Tammy Lynn. Hi, Kathy Gonzalez. I'm glad you got the time straight. Hello, Lisa. Hey, Verna. Hi, Renee Martinez. How are you, honey? Hey, Larry Climas. Now remember that name, everybody. This is going to be important. Hey, Shanley. Remember that name. That's going to be important too. Hey, David. Hey, David Vigiano. How you doing, honey? Hey, Charmaine. Oh, I love this color on me too. It's my favorite color. Hey, Becky from Fort Worth. Spent a lot of time in Fort Worth. Well, before COVID. Hey, Lori Clark. Sue Wood. Hi. Hi, Terry. Wenatchee? Where is that? Where is Wenatchee? That's a question. Well, hi, everybody. We have such a fun show today. It's going to be so great. And before we get to that show, I want to talk a little bit about the astrology because I want to know from people if you guys had like a crazy week. Boy, I just froze there. See, the crazy week. This energy this week is so strange. Oh, thank you, Susan. I love my tulips too. I'm such a tulip person. I'm all of that. Hey, John Fumo. Another name that's important here. Oh my gosh. So we've got the whole team here. So this is very exciting. So this week, the energy is very intense. And tomorrow we have a square. We have a April 9th is going to be a challenging day. We'll call it that. How about that? A challenging day. Mars is squaring Neptune. Mars in Gemini, and Gemini is communications. The way we speak to one another, actual communication, internet, things like that. And it's squaring Neptune, and that Neptune's in Pisces. So the dreamy thing. So tomorrow's going to be a very challenging day with low energy. So watch your energy. Maybe wake up earlier and make sure you exercise and do everything you can because it's going to be a kind of an intense day here. It can lead to things like feeling self-defeated. Just know it's just temporary, for goodness sakes, it's temporary. But when energy hits you and you feel like, God, is this going to last forever? And it's like, no. It's going to move on. But so tomorrow is going to be what I call, a challenging day. I mean, people can get jealous and suspicious, and it's just kind of a nutty day. That's just tomorrow. Then it'll pass. And then we have a new moon in Aries on the 11th. And always during these new moons, it's a good time to begin something. And in Aries, it really means the beginning. So this is a perfect time to plan something just with your life. It's a very potent day. It's very important. Set intentions for the year. Set your intentions. So even though tomorrow might be a little like, in a couple of days from there, I want you to think about your intentions and get real straight. It's time to strategize and set a plan. Okay, that's on the 11th. And then on the 12th, so this is a roller coaster month. I wrote about it. It's on my blog, on my website, and I think it's on my Facebook page. This is a roller coaster month. And on April 12th, so we've got the next few days, like woo, like this. On the 12th, in Venus, planet of love and relationships, squares Pluto. Pluto is intensity and it's hidden. So you may feel a little more vulnerable. It may be intense in relationships. You might have to come face to face with some emotions there, and then things start to move on again too. So just know it's a little, hi, Mike Leck, nice to see you. It's just going to be a very kind of intense few days here. We'll get past that. But so anyway, just wanted to give you kind of a heads up for the week. We have a very, very exciting guest here, and I'm not going to bring him in yet. Why do I keep freezing? I'm sorry I'm freezing, everybody. I don't know what's happening there. That doesn't usually happen around here. Because I live so remotely, I don't even have to share the internet. anybody. So I don't know what that's about. Anyway, I have an incredible guest today, and it's somebody that is you will recognize the voice, which we'll bring him on in a minute, but you'll recognize the voice. And I have known Bill, and we'll bring him on in a minute. I have known Bill Cinque for many years now, and he's really become a family to me, frankly. He's and his girlfriend Shanley is one of my dearest friends, and I love them so much. We've all gone through so much together, and we've really had an extraordinary relationship. And Bill actually was on my show with Dr. Shirley with Both Sides Now several years ago. He's been on it a couple of times actually because he had some really interesting experiences spiritually. But Bill is a celebrated musician. And when I was saying, I wanted everybody to remember certain names like Larry Klimas and John Fumo. And they all, and my husband, Don Marquise, they all played with Neil Diamond for many, many years together. And so we were on this incredible ride and journey together with Neil Diamond for many years, and it brought all of us really close. You can imagine. And these musicians are just incredible musicians, incredible. Well, Bill is part of this group, and Bill is a bass player, an extraordinary bass player, and an extraordinary singer. And there's nothing that he cannot do. He's a celebrated musician and hypnotist, and hypnotist. And he is a member of the Grammys. He played with Neil Diamond for years as a bassist. He's in the Hall of Fame band. He is he was an executive producer and a co-creator, and he wrote a book, a successful book called "The Amazing Adventures of a Marginally Successful Musician," which you guys should read. It's really great. You can find that on his website. But he spent the last 42 years in the music business as an artist, producer, songwriter, and he's performed with platinum selling artists, and he's had the extreme pleasure to work with Neil Diamond for many years, and he literally has performed in front of millions of people. He is something. But what is so amazing about him is that he went back to school and decided he wanted to give back to the world in a different form. I mean, his music is incredible, but he wanted to do something a little different. And you know, when you get that urge to do something different, he actually acted on it. And I was so impressed with this. And he is now a certified hypnotist, an extraordinary, and he can help with things that we're going to talk about, like smoking or stop smoking and diet and stage fright. Think about that. Think about his combination of stage fright with the work that he's done as a musician. But I think he's the world of him. And if you recognize this voice, I'm going to introduce Bill Cinque.
Thank you, Kelly. I guess the voice we're looking for is, and I'll have to get into character to do this, so I want to make sure I'm on. It was something to the effect of, "Ask me anything," featuring spiritualist Kelly White. How did I do?
That was great. Thank you so much.
That's quite all right. It was incredibly loud at this end. I have to tell you that's what I have to do to make that character
It was
voice.
great. Well, welcome, Bill. I'm so glad you're with us. So
I
glad you're
am
here
so happy to be
today.
here.
My
Thank
gosh,
you, thank you,
what a journey you've had. What
and
a
still
journey.
going. Yeah, still going.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Tell us how did you decide to become a hypnotist and what a hypnotist does? We're going to have a lot of questions for you.
Sure, sure. Essentially, I was always on kind of the fringe of the healing arts and holistic, kind of outside the box stuff, and I kind of came across hypnotism just as a lark, so to speak, and I started following it, and I started looking it up a little bit, and I actually should tell your audience that one of the most valued opinions I could find would be none other than our friend Kelly White
Oh.
sitting here. So I asked Kelly and also Dr. Shirley Impellizzeri, who's a friend of the show. I'm sure everybody knows. I asked both of them and I said, what do you think about this kind of kooky idea about me attempting to be a hypnotist, going to school for it and really, really just selling out and going for it? And both of my dear friends just said they thought it was a wonderful idea. They thought I'd be a good fit. And they kind of gave me the the little bit of a nudge off the edge of the diving board, when you're on the precipice and you're not sure what you want to do. And so thank you to both of you for kind of steering me in the right direction. And I have to tell you, from the first book I opened and from the first article I read and from the first class, I was completely immersed. I loved it.
Wow.
I couldn't get enough of it. And it has turned into a career which I would not have imagined 20 years
Right.
ago. Yeah.
Isn't it amazing how the universe works? 'Cause
Yeah.
some people just stay in the same place and they don't really think outside of what they have done. And I love that you continue to grow and learn and have now gone into a fascinating direction here. And when I think of hypnotists, well, back in the day, I think a lot of people think of this. They might think, oh, I'm going to be, out of my control. I won't be able to control,
Yeah.
anything. So tell us what exactly, and everybody's loving your poster of the Beatles, by the way.
Oh, good. Well, that's still in my life. That's still a big time factor in my life. The idea of hypnotism is essentially this: if you were to boil it all down, it's pretty much changing your view. It's changing your some of your questions about yourself. It's changing some of the perspectives. So, for instance, when you kind of get deep into the subconscious, you find out you kind of untangle things. And I guess the best way I could explain it is you have your conscious mind
Yeah.
and then your subconscious mind, but your subconscious mind is probably 20 times the size of the conscious mind. So most people who smoke cigarettes, I don't have to explain to them what's wrong with smoking cigarettes. I don't have to explain to them about nicotine or emphysema. They know that. In their
Yeah.
conscious mind, they know that. Why do they keep doing it? It would be the same thing with people who gain too much weight. Why are you doing it when when you know that it's harming you? And so what you do is you go to that second level, you go underneath, and you kind of try to get to the root. And what happens is you very often get to that spot where you believe something about yourself that might not be true. In essence,
Mm.
a lot of people just say, "Oh no, I just can't stop smoking," or "I'm not good enough to get that job," or "I'll never be beautiful, so why should I
Yeah.
bother losing weight?" Um, Again, this is all very uh,
Yes.
superficial
Mm.
at this point,
Mhm.
without going too far into it. But the idea is a friendly conversation with a friend very rarely changes your real opinion of yourself. It makes you feel good for the moment, but
Yeah.
a casual conversation over a cup of coffee, I don't know that that's going to stop anybody from smoking cigarettes. I
Right.
don't know
And
that that's
those
going to
kind of
stop anybody.
changes are tough.
Yeah, yeah. Fear of flying is another one.
Oh,
Fear of heights, and uh, not being able to sleep is always
mhm,
one of those kind of tricky ones because so many people have some level of it.
right,
They think, well, if I got 3 hours sleep, that's okay. Well, we know it's really not okay, but they've
right.
come to think of that as their comfort zone. It's okay to operate like that. So
Yeah.
it takes on a couple of different flavors. It keeps on a couple of different colors as we go through it. But it's really very interesting. It's just really so much about changing your perspective and changing your beliefs about what you can and can't do.
And what's the process? So if somebody comes to see you and we have a lot of questions, which I want to get to. And Connie, I agree. The subconscious mind is such a powerful healing tool. Um, Steve, I say Steve Cinque is your brother. Let Bill know that his toughest audience is watching.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah. Well,
siblings are so fun.
I've got them on both coasts now. Yeah, I have the band on one here, one hand, and
Yes.
the family on the other.
Yeah.
Um, the process is there's a couple of different ways to go about it, and there is something called what we generally call a script. Now, what the script is kind of like a basic recipe. So,
Mhm.
for instance, I would get you to relax. I'd get you to breathe deeply. At some point, I would get you into some level of trance. And that's the part that always sounds scary. But the fact is, you're in
What
a
is
trance.
that? I mean,
Yeah.
is
I,
that through talking to them? Like you're going, like I always imagine a watch going like this.
well, I have that. I have a
Oh,
pendulum.
Oh, it really is a
and
pendulum.
it works great. It works incredibly well. Um, part of the process, as we're talking about it, sometimes you would use a pendulum, yeah,
Okay.
but the script part of it is this: there's a basic format about getting you to relax, about getting you to breathe deep. There's a number of level of trances. There's 6 basic levels, and the idea is when you wake up in the morning, when you go to sleep at night, that
Mhm.
30 seconds right before you fall asleep or right after you wake up, you're pretty much in a trance. They call it hypnopopic and hypnagogic. And there are times, the great example is when you're driving. Did you ever all of a sudden realize that you missed your exit,
Oh,
even though you've lived
d
there for 20 years, you know?
oh, in LA all the time,
Well, you
and
were
I
kind
do it
of,
here
yeah, you were
too. Yeah.
distracted. Of course,
Yeah.
you were distracted. You were kind of, well, you were basically in a trance. Now, the thing is, you didn't run off the road. You didn't forget how to drive. You didn't steer into
Right,
oncoming traffic. But you were tranced. Half of your brain
right.
was over here, and the other half knew that you should stay on the road and drive the speed limit. And
Interesting.
so, essentially, most of us are in trance 3, 4, 5 times a day, but we don't know it.
Wow. How
Um,
interesting.
so we just access that, and there are clients who, I won't exaggerate, but I would say within 6 or 7 minutes of when I start talking, they're gone. They're just out.
Wow.
Um, One of my favorite things to do is at the end of every at the end of every session, you count backwards from 5 to 1, or however you do it,
Mhm.
and I snap my fingers and I'll say, "How do you feel?" And they'll say, "I feel very relaxed." And I'll say, without looking at the clock, "How long do you think we've been doing this?" And they'll say, 15 or 20 minutes. And then I'll say to them, "Well, do you realize we've been doing this for an hour and 20 minutes?" They had no idea.
Wow. Wow.
Um, so the idea of the script is basic, and it's a bit like a recipe where every hypnotist would probably add their own flair.
Mhm.
I get pretty creative. I get pretty outside the box. My catchphrase on my website is, "This is not your grandparents' hypnosis," because everybody
Right.
thinks, well, everybody I know is thought of. I mean, I'm 62 years old. My idea originally of hypnosis was watching Superman, and somebody gets
Right.
hypnotized and they walk down the street like a zombie,
Right.
right? That's what we grew up on. Well, it's none of that. It's nothing close to that. It's not mind control. Everything is with your permission. As the client, you're in complete control. I always say you're driving the bus. When you say we're stopping, we stop.
And when you're working with somebody, for instance, who's about smoking,
Yeah.
how long does something like that take? How many sessions would it take to feel an impact?
Well, I can tell you from personal experience
Mhm.
that it very often maybe takes, you know 7 or 8 sessions. But I had one recently. I won't mention any names because, once again, we use privacy, and
Yeah.
uh, kind of the same thing that a psychologist or a psychiatrist would
Right.
use, as far as the creed and
Confidentiality.
the
Yeah.
oath. Yeah. um, but I had someone recently who had a very serious situation, not smoking cigarettes, but with smoking pot. And he just
Mm.
couldn't stop. And he was essentially couldn't get away from it. And I did 2 sessions with him, and there didn't seem to be much movement. And to make a kind of a long story short, the third session, I talked to him and I said, "How is that going?" And he said, "Well, it's actually been 10 days." And I said, "How did that not, you didn't mention that the
Yeah.
other day when I
Right.
spoke to you?" And he said, "Actually, that was the beauty of it. It was so out of his sphere that he
Wow.
didn't even, it's not like he came running over and said, 'Guess what? I quit.' He said, no, didn't even talk about it because it didn't even enter his mind
Wow.
after essentially one session, because the next two, he didn't even mention it. Um, so
Wow.
that was it. It comes and goes like I said, it's different flavors and different colors. It's not one size fits all. But for someone to stop smoking, a good deal of the time, it happens probably less than 8 sessions.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I have a question for you too. Felicia Palio asks, she says she was looking into hypnosis for severe IBS colitis. How can this help? I mean, can it help this kind of condition?
Yes, it can. And
Wow.
of all topics for you to mention, I actually treated someone with this. I know that I hope that doesn't sound like I'm making
Oh,
it up.
this is great. Tell us about it
Yeah,
if you can.
yeah, I will. The bigger issue is this, that any physical pain is always accompanied with some kind of stress and anxiety. And if you back that out to like the second circle, if you have a sprained ankle, it not only hurts when you walk on it, but if somebody said to you, in 5 minutes, we have to go out, you're already getting anxious because you know in 5 minutes when you stand
Right,
up, your legs are going to hurt, right? A
right,
better example is if somebody got a call today and said, you're going to the dentist next Wednesday. For the next 5 days, some people are just, they're nervous and anxious because they
right.
don't want to go to the dentist.
Mhm.
So when it comes to IBS being irritable bowel syndrome, right? We talking about the same thing?
Mhm. Yep.
What part of the problem is this? If you're talking about irritable bowel syndrome, that's not the kind of thing you talk about at happy hour, right? It's not the kind of thing that you talk about casually over drinks with a friend. It can be embarrassing. It's painful. It's a lot of things. So already you're starting with the anxiety on top of the anxiety on top of the
Yeah.
problem, right? So what I did was one of the techniques that I used just to relieve the anxiety was to say this: if you could take the pain and the anxiety that you're feeling, and this is in trance, I said, imagine yourself sitting in a movie theater and you're up front, you're the first row, and the movie screen is so big you can barely see the edge of it because you're so close. It's all bright red, and that bright red is signifying your anxiety and your pain from this condition you have.
Mm, wow.
Now, look at it, and right in the middle of the screen is going to be a tiny blue dot, and that's the healing part. And we're going to stare at that until it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And the screen starts melting and it changes color. And suddenly everything that was red, that was inflamed, that was painful, that was anxiety shrinks away. And I keep them there until there's no more red.
Mm,
Now that's the visual
mhm.
that I gave. Now here is the connection. I'm saying that to everybody right now who is wide awake and incredibly cognizant, right? But when you imprint that in your subconscious, it's a whole different deal than this
Right,
conversation right now. So
right.
what happened was this person said, okay, I'm looking at it, I'm seeing it as a thing. I'm seeing it as a thing that I can control. I'm seeing it as a thing that I can reduce. It's not that it fixed it. No one ever said it cured it. But
Mm,
what you did was you took away 3 levels of anxiety before you even got to the pain. So you were already better, much far better off than you were. Now it's
mm.
manageable.
Wow.
When you go the next step and you realize that so much of the IBS is flared up by stress and anxiety, well, now you're into the second level of it, right? So if you've taken away what's present and now you've taken away the power of it to bother you in the future, meaning,
Right.
the anticipatory anxiety, as we call it, even before it happens, you're worried about it. You're worried
Wow.
about getting in
Yeah.
the car because you don't want to go someplace. When you take away a lot of that anxiety, you have a manageable condition.
Right. Wow.
And that's how I dealt with it with the movie screen, and it seemed to work pretty well.
Wow, that's amazing. That thank you for that, and I'm glad you had it worked really well with your clients. So anybody with this might be a really great tool to use as being with Bill as a hypnotherapist. Terry Picardo says this is very interesting. My Aspie daughter, so Asperger's daughter, had a
Mhm.
major meltdown at 17. Had it with trying to fit in and lots of things. Hypnotherapy is what keeps her grounded. It really helps her anxiety. So I want to ask you about that population, Bill. Anybody who's on the spectrum, would it help them with anxiety?
Yeah, it does. Pretty much um, hypnotizing somebody and going into the subconscious to help
Mhm.
relieve anxiety would relieve any condition,
Yeah.
any condition that is associated with anxiety. And I want to be careful with the language here because if you go to my website as a client, one of the first things you do is fill out this client agreement form. It says where I went to school. It says that I'm certified. It says that you understand that I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a medical doctor.
Right.
I'm not a psychologist. There won't be any prescriptions. I'm not a
Mm.
dietitian. It says what I'm not because you have to bring that into focus. What I am is as important as what I'm not
Mhm.
under these conditions. So when you say something like Asperger's, treating Asperger's per se is a little outside my scope.
Okay.
Treating the anxiety that's accompanied
Mhm.
is a bit
Right.
of a different thing. And I don't want anybody to think that I'm playing word games or playing with
No, that I
semantics. It's
understand. You made it very
yeah,
clear, actually. So what you would do is you would treat people with anxiety.
sure. And if they had a doctor, a medical doctor who wanted to
Mhm.
talk to me about what I might or might not do, that that's
Right.
completely understandable. That would be it. We do have an intake form that you would fill out saying
Okay.
if you're on medication and listing your doctor. But a lot of the time, it does come down to anxiety and stress is so much more prevalent than ever,
Oh, yeah.
and it's deeper than
Hmm.
ever. I mean, when I started off by
Truly.
saying, yeah, when I said this is not your, your grandparents' hypnosis, um, eh, these days we have a whole new language that didn't even
Hmm.
exist a few years ago. In the last 18 months or whatever it is, words like COVID and social
Right.
distancing and that didn't even exist. Had you said that
Right.
5 years ago, nobody'd know what you're talking about.
Right.
And these are all incredible stressors. I mean, if you say that, if you mention those words, you're into a stressful
Or
situation.
vaccination. If you say that
Sure,
word, people
of
really get
course.
stressed. Yeah.
Um, so the stressors are different.
Hmm.
The anxiety level is different.
Hmm.
Lockdown makes everything amplified.
Right. And you can do your
And
work on Zoom, like a lot
as
of
a
us are
matter of
doing our
fact,
work.
yeah, interestingly, I prefer it. And the
Hmm.
reason I prefer it is it's a much more controlled environment. So if you could literally be in your bed with
Hmm.
headphones, which means if the dog is barking downstairs, it doesn't interrupt anything. You don't have to get in the car and drive to my office.
Yeah.
It's a much more controlled set of circumstances. An hour is an hour, meaning from start to finish,
Right.
we're in. We're not waiting. We're not stuck in
That's
traffic.
so
There's no
true.
waiting room. Yeah. And
Wow.
it's incredibly intimate. I mean, the idea of using microphones and headphones, this is the brave new world we live in.
Yep.
It kind of it was, necessity being the mother of invention. It's now fantastic. I think it's equally as effective, if not maybe even more effective than being face to face.
A lot of people have asked me, do you do past life regression? And I know that's not the type that you do, but have you into anybody or any situation where that has come up?
I've done it about 12 times.
Really? Tell
Yeah,
us about
yeah,
it.
because
I
I
didn't
am a
know
big
that. This
fan
is
of Kelly White.
fascinating.
I'm a big fan of Kelly White. I'm a big fan of James Van Praagh, and yeah, uh, that was another. I will say this: I wear a lot of hats in my life, and I love every bit of all of it.
Mhm.
But every hat has a couple of different spokes on that wheel as well. So it's when it comes to being a hypnotist, it's not just smoking or fear of flying. We were we I'll say we were trained
Mhm.
to handle some past life regression. Now, my first impulse at the time was to say, I'd really rather focus, if I were to have a focus, I focus on the entertainment business. And I can get to
Right,
that in a minute, stage fright and those kind of things.
right.
And what happened was this what I affectionately refer to as going to the woo woo side. The woo.
Well, you're
I'm
woo-woo baby now.
Yeah, I don't make fun of it
Welcome
at
to
all.
my
Like I
world.
yeah, you are knee deep in woo woo. Um, I said, anybody that wants to go woo woo, I'm all for it. Well, what happened was when I said that, it opened up the floodgates.
It
I
sure
had
would.
people I've never met. I had friends of friends, and I actually had some good friends, some of them I know are watching right now, that would call me, and I could always tell where the conversation was going by how much they stammered. Because when someone just calls and they'll say, "Hey, look, man, I gained 25 pounds. Can you help me?"
Right.
Well, that's a straight up, there's no question about it. But when someone goes, "Hey, Bill, I got this, um, you're probably going to think I'm crazy, but," and I can't even talk to my parents about,
Yeah.
there's this preamble that goes on forever
Mhm.
because they don't want to, they're a little reluctant to come out and just say, "I'm really interested in that past life regression thing." And
Mhm.
I've done it a couple of times. Well, I've done it more than a couple of times, but a few of the times has really been life changing.
I can imagine that it is. Did it
Yeah.
come spontaneously to you, or are how does that work? They come to you with that in mind? That's what they wanna
Yeah.
specialize, or that's
Yeah.
what they want a session on?
Yeah. That's,
Oh,
that's what's happened with me. As a matter of fact, people have
wow.
said that just straight out that's what they wanted. And it was really
Wow.
interesting because there is something called age regression, which I'm sure you're familiar with, was if there's a blockage,
Mhm.
uh, you go back and say, well, did you have this when you were 17? Yes. Did you have it when you were 16? You have fear of flying. Did you have it when you were 15?
Mhm.
Yes. Did you have it when you were 14? No. Well, what happened in there that
Mhm.
fear of flying? They fell down a flight of steps. They didn't make the comparison that made them afraid of heights, or so that's age regression, and that kind of got interesting in a couple of spots because that really showed you that you could get past some of those roadblocks. But when you get to 15 years old, 10 years old, 5 years old, and then you get to 0 years old,
Mhm.
and you start going into the other life, the basic idea for me was whatever you bring to the table is okay with me.
Right.
It doesn't have to, it's not for me to judge. It's not for me to agree with or disagree with. Um, it's just, if you bring it, let's see if we can, let's see if we can do something with it.
Well, sometimes there'll be something in somebody's lifetime here. They don't understand why they would have a fear of water, say. And
Mhm.
they'll say to me, "Did I drown?" I said, "I really don't know if you drowned in a past life or not." But and often I'll say, "You might want to go do some regression on that." So sometimes whatever's going on in this lifetime can be from a past life, and it'll
Right.
be interesting to see with the people that you work with how that comes up. Yeah, Gretchen White mentions Dr. Brian Weiss, and he does that type of hypnotherapy in the back, in past lives. So this is so interesting too. So let's talk
Yeah.
about stage fright, because that's a big one for, so that fear of speaking is number one out in public. Number two is fear of
Yeah.
death,
That's right.
and I work with
There's,
death.
there's
I
a
work with
there's a little
death.
comedy. There's a little comedy bit. There's a comedy bit about that saying, if public speaking is the greatest fear, and the second fear is fear of death, then giving your own eulogy must be the worst thing in the world to have to stand up in front of people and talk about your own death. Uh,
That's
yeah,
really funny.
stage fright. Stage fright. It kind of goes back to the anxiety thing, where stage fright. Some people just think that's being afraid to be on stage. Right. That would be the obvious thing to make
Yeah.
sense to say, oh, I'm okay. Again, kind of like peeling the layers on that onion. Stage fright starts sometimes a week before. You know
Yeah.
that, and I'm not talking about being at Madison Square Garden or
Which you have done many times.
well, I have to start using a different phrase because
Mhm.
I've been saying that for so many years, and I realize I have been on the stage at Madison Square Garden with all the people you mentioned, by the way, with Don Marquise and Larry Klimas and John Fumo. But the idea of, if somebody has to give a speech at an awards dinner for their insurance company,
Mhm.
some people are fine with it. Some people, it just flips them out, and they can't sleep for 3 days before that. So the idea of stage fright, um, if I'll try to make a quick story. One of my clients is actually a well-known Broadway figure. I won't mention any names. A long career. Anybody who would be familiar with Broadway shows would know some of the work. And a woman, and I said to her, we were talking about her lack of confidence because this last year has rocked
Yeah,
everybody.
it
Right? People
really
that were very
has.
confident a year ago,
Mhm. Very true.
and so she had had some hypnotherapy and some hypnotism, and it didn't quite take. And so what I did with her was this. Um, I am a New Yorker. I'm a native New Yorker. So I've been to many Broadway shows. I've been in the theaters. I've been associated with that stuff for a long time. So what I did was I took her back a little further in the day of a show, is what they call
Mhm.
guided imagery, right? It's almost the same as they sometimes do in yoga or in
Right.
meditation. And I said, rather than starting off there, let's go back 2 hours. You're getting out of the cab and going up to the artist entrance. The artist entrance is where all the performers come in. They don't walk through the front door under the marquee like the audience does. It's around the back and down the alley kind of
Right.
thing. I said, picture yourself getting out of a cab in New York City, walking down the side street to your theater, going in through the artist entrance, walking up the stairs, putting down your bags, sitting at the desk, and putting on your makeup. Let's start there. Now, you're going through your ritual because everybody has one. Everybody in that world has their ritual of how they do it and when they do it, and a bottle of water or a cup of tea.
Right.
I walked her through the whole thing, and I said, you're going to enter the stage from stage right. You're going to walk downstage, and on house left, there's your family. Now, what I just said might not resonate with a lot of people in the audience, but from her perspective,
Right.
the fact that I was relating to her using words like stage right, house left, upstage, downstage, right? She was there.
That must have
At
been
the
so
end of it,
calming for her.
yeah, at the end of it, I do my finger snap. She opens her eyes and she's crying, bawling. And the whole time she's saying, I'm not crying because I'm sad. I'm so empowered right now.
Mm.
And she just needed to walk through that process that was not necessarily standing in the middle with a bunch of floodlights on you with a microphone.
Right.
She the ramp up gave her a lot of comfort and
Right.
confidence, and she was there with her fellow actors and the makeup and the security guard who opened the door for her. I walked through the whole thing, and she said that that's what broke through.
Wow.
So stage fright isn't always just standing on the stage. It's the anticipatory stuff before it, and it worked so well. It was great. I mean, I was uh, there's an old saying that our instructor would say. He said, you have 10,000 clients. I've never hypnotized one of them. They all hypnotize themselves.
Mm.
And it was her work. It was her imagination.
Right.
I was just guiding her.
Wow. Wow. How does it work with test anxiety? Because we have a lot of people that will be taking the bar or they're getting their license exam or, whatever it happens to be for test
Mhm.
anxiety. How does that work?
The little bit I've done with that, it was some of the same procedure. What I try to do is, again, if I go back to something that we talked about a few minutes ago, is the idea of having a basic recipe and then you
Mhm.
modify it to fit the specific client. You kind of tailor it. And one of the things I did was this younger person in school, brilliant, brilliant mind. And it was funny to me that it's the brilliant ones that have the anxiety about taking the test.
Yeah.
I never had anxiety because I was never brilliant in school. So, whatever it was okay if I had a B
Right.
minus. But
Yep.
some of these people, if it's not an A plus,
Right.
it's a failure to them, right?
Mhm.
And so one of the things I did with one of there was a younger gentleman, a younger guy, and he was kind of a tough guy, but he was getting stressed about that. And I was talking to him in his own language, which we sometimes call mirroring, if you're talking about
Mhm.
rapport, you know. And I didn't want to sound like some therapist wearing a monocle and smoking a corn cob, pipe or
Mm.
something. I mean, I wanted to just talk to him like he's a guy. And I said, why do you think you can't do this? And he said, oh, I don't know. And then I said, well, why do you think you can't get everything you need in the next 2 weeks when you're studying? And he said, well, I don't know. And I said to him, well, for someone who's supposed to have a lot of answers, you don't seem to have many. What's going on? Is there something about this that you can't figure out? Is there something about this test? And he said, no, not really. And I kind of amped him up a little bit, and I kind of walked him up a flight of stairs. And at the end, I just said to him, well, are you going to pass this thing or not? And he said, of course I'm going to pass it. I said, well, that's great that you're saying that now, because you didn't say that 20 minutes ago. He just
Oh,
needed to hear his own words sometimes.
wow.
Sometimes uh, you have to talk to him on his own level. I didn't want to talk to him like a teacher. I just said, look, why can't you pass this? Of course you're going to pass this. You passed the last 12 that you took. You got an A plus on all of them. What are you freaking out now for? Did somebody throw you a curveball? And kind of made him laugh at himself. And he kind of shucked and jived and, yeah, okay, I guess I'll be all right. And, that was part of that. Another
Oh,
friend was taking a nursing exam, and I did something similar.
wow.
And
Wow.
we got to the point where in about an hour's time, she went from, I can't do this, I'm never going to pass. And by the time she was hanging up, she was saying, yeah, this is going to be easy. This is fine. There's nothing to be scared of.
So it's moving the fear.
Exactly. And it's
Yeah.
just, sometimes it's just introducing a little bit of reality. You know,
Hmm.
you, you've done 100% on the last 15 exams you've taken.
All
Why
right.
would you think you're going to bail out on this one? And that's comforting to
Amazing.
them.
Of
Yeah.
course. Let's talk about fear of water. Have you run into that? Because summer's coming up.
Yeah. Wow. I'm so glad you didn't name a bunch of topics that I haven't dealt with.
I am an
Uh,
intuitive.
well, I should have known better than to even say that.
And Bill and I have not
The
talked about this at all. So,
No, we really haven't. There was no pre-talk about any of this. This is interesting. Uh, what I found with water is I've had a couple of people who had. Some people were afraid of the depth of the water. Some people
oh,
were afraid of the color of the water, and
really? Huh.
essentially, if they can't see the bottom, it's a whole different thing. Meaning,
Hmm.
they're okay in the ocean
Yeah.
if their feet are on the ground. As soon as they can't see the bottom or can't feel the bottom, um, it's a whole different world for them. And the idea of a phobia being, the difference between a fear and a phobia is a phobia really affects your life. It changes your
Yeah.
life. And one of the examples is if you're afraid of sharks, well, that's a fear,
Oh, count me in
right?
on that one. Yeah.
But if you're afraid of sharks in your swimming pool, that might be a phobia because there's.
Right.
And I'm not saying that, I'm not making fun of any, but there are
No,
people
you're
that really feel
absolutely
that.
right. Right.
So if you're in the ocean and you're swimming in 15 feet of water, yeah, I'm afraid of sharks too. I don't think that they're necessarily going to show up in the bathtub, you know.
Right.
Uh, and there are people that can't put their face down in the water in bathtubs. So
Right.
there's a lot of different fears under the umbrella. Sometimes it's the color of the water, the depth of the water. They feel out of control because they can't touch the bottom.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again, you just take that anxiety, one anxiety at a time.
Wow. Yeah. One anxiety at a time for sure. And yeah, Anne Margaret, I love that name, says fear gets us false expectations appearing real. That's what James Van Prague always says that. Oh, this is interesting. Laura Parmley Hoffman says, what about the fear of getting sick, health problems, and getting older? It's an interesting fear. Hmm.
Well, fear of getting older. Uh,
It's going to happen.
yeah, as far as I
And you're
know,
lucky if it happens. It's a good thing.
it's the fear of not getting older that you
Yeah,
should be
right.
afraid of. Uh, yeah,
Brings wisdom.
that's true. That's true. I would think that would, I hate to be so repetitive, but so much of it is so anxiety and stress
Yeah.
based.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, I think you would deal with a lot of this stuff almost the same way.
Yeah.
That some of these scripts you'd be floating on a cloud. You'd be walking through the forest, and you would smell. You'd not only hear the wind blowing through the trees, you could smell the grass, you can feel the dirt under your feet, all that kind of stuff in this
Yeah.
guided imagery. And I will tell you firsthand my experience being hypnotized.
Yeah, what was that like?
Oh, it was one of my favorite stories. Well, in school, we were hypnotized. I'd be hypnotized 3 times in 6 hours. I mean, I was like I was the ultimate, patient. And there was one in particular. I hope my friend Jeanette is watching. My classmate. I had read the script the night before, and it was about floating on a cloud. It's everything you would think it would be, right? You're
Mhm.
drifting, and your eyes are closed, and you're comfortable. And I read it, and I said to myself, "Who the hell is going to go for this? This is the stupidest thing I've ever read." And my dear friend Jeanette hypnotized me in about 3 minutes using that script, which I thought would never work, and I was gone for a half hour.
Wow.
So I always put myself as the example
Mhm.
of, I know you think this might not work. I know you think it's
Right.
beneath you. I know it's some people it's too scary. It works, and it's some of the stuff that's effective would actually kind of blow your mind as to how
I
and why it works.
It's amazing. There's a question here. Debbie Foster Horan says she would love to help her daughter with past traumas. Do you work with minors? Which is a good question.
Yes, and it would have to be with the parents' permission. And if
Right.
there's a medical situation, you would want to talk to the doctor. I haven't had a lot of experience with that. I have had one who was an athlete, and it was more focus.
Mhm.
Um, he had problems with focusing,
Okay.
and it was affecting his game. And he was a college prospect, so they wanted to work on that, and it was very successful. I think it would have to be a case by case basis if you're talking about a
Okay.
minor, because depending
Yeah.
on what the circumstances are, would
Oh, yeah.
dictate whether or not I would say yes or no.
Oh, I understand very well. This is a great question. Susan Spinelli Bucci says, "Has there ever been anyone you couldn't hypnotize? She was unable to be hypnotized, but her friends all were. Why would they be able to and not her?" Great question. I've always wondered that myself.
Yeah, if you don't want to be hypnotized, I probably can't hypnotize you. That's the first thing. The
So, in other
second
words,
thing
when you
is,
come to see you, you're going to be open to it.
yeah, I haven't experienced a lot of this, but I know it does happen.
Mhm.
Uh, if someone called me and said, "Yeah, I want to stop smoking. My wife told me to call you," I kind of have to.
Right.
That's going to take some explanation,
Oh,
because if your wife suggested that you come and you agreed, that's great. If you are only here
right.
to placate her, we're probably not going to get too far. If you don't want to do it, it's probably not going to work very well. And as far as people I could not hypnotize, I will have to fess up, because this is your show and your audience deserves truth. The one person I didn't do so well with was my sister.
Okay. Is that because she is your sister? I would not do well with mine.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I have a great relationship. I have 3 sisters and a brother. I have a great relationship with everybody in my family. Uh, it just didn't quite take. They weren't quite invested.
Mm.
They kind of. I'm not sure that they wanted to be there. I think they were more curious than they were wanting to get something done.
Oh,
So yes, there are certainly anybody can be hypnotized. That does not mean that
yeah.
100% of the time people want to
Mm.
be hypnotized.
Right,
And
right.
so
Well,
you'd
it's the
have to
same
be
thing
open
when
to it.
people come to they'll say, "Oh, my husband sent me here. I'm here because my husband told me to be here for a reading." It's not really
Yeah.
what I want to work with. I want to work with, "Oh, do
Yeah.
you want a reading?" So true. So, oh, this is Anne Margaret asked, "Does procrastination need 8 sessions?" They say it's an emotional cause.
Well, do you want to wait on that one? If you're procrastinating,
Oh my
that
God,
may, I don't know
procrastinators.
that it takes. Yeah, I don't think it. I don't think that would take 8 sessions. I think it's a matter of if somebody wants to, uh, if somebody wants to realize what they're doing,
Right.
as opposed to excusing what they're doing. If
Yeah.
someone wants to come down to the basic facts that the other 3 people were sitting in the car with the engine running in the driveway, and I'm still putting on my makeup. You know,
Right.
when someone wants to admit that, I think you could probably work with it, I'm sure we could do that
Oh,
in less than 8 sessions. Yeah.
two good questions here. I'm not sure which one. I'm going to start with. I'm going to start with this one. Kathy Wood Rayon says, "What about stuttering?"
From what I understand, there are many, many cases of while they're under hypnosis, they don't stutter. Now,
Interesting.
as to how that translates to the being outside of a trance, I think the jury's
Mhm.
still out on. I couldn't speak to that because I don't know firsthand, but I do know that there have been many cases where under hypnosis,
Mm,
people stop stuttering,
right.
and
Interesting.
then they pick it up again when they
Right.
come out of it.
Well,
So that would take
people
some
are.
investigation.
I have to tell you, people are saying you rock, Bill. So everybody's loving this.
Well,
Paul, my dear
I'm loving
friend,
them.
I know my dear friend Paul Calliser, who I just adore, says, "May I ask what drew you to this line of work?"
Is that Paul that asked that? Your friend
Hmm.
Paul? Is that what you said? Oh, there
Hmm.
he is. Yeah. Excuse me. Um, well, I think part of it was because I spent my whole life in music. I know this might seem like it's kind of a stretch, but at the end, it really isn't. Uh, I spent so much time with feeling and experiencing vibe. And I've experienced vibe from 20,000 people at the same time. I've
Wow.
experienced vibe from really 2 million people in 2 tours with Neil Diamond alone. I'm not dropping names, we're talking about him. Uh, I have also experienced vibe from 8 people on a rainy Monday night at some happy hour.
Mhm.
And the fact is, sometimes even the most intimate, smallest audience, when you're in touch and you tap into them, it's unbelievable. It's just an unbelievable feeling to communicate it
Yeah.
on that level. And so when I started figuring out a little bit about hypnosis, I thought, well, this might be a personal challenge because I've experienced it in huge crowds. Can I do this one on one? Can I get the vibe? Can I tap in?
Mhm.
Can I really tune in to exactly what you need? If you give me 50 people on a dance floor, I could probably figure out what songs to play to make everybody
Right.
clap with their hands over their head. Now, can I
Oh,
really tap into the one person who
interesting.
says, I have a fear of flying, I want to lose weight, uh, I'm
Yeah.
afraid of heights? And it was that kind of a challenge that was actually, I'm kind of a cocky guy to begin with. So I was up for the challenge. I was up for my personal challenge. I'm not up for everybody's challenge, but I was up for that. And that's what drew me to it. The fact of going one on one and just saying, hey, there's a problem. Let's go figure it
Well,
out.
I love how you translated it from, 2 million people and the vibe, you mean the vibration of everything and
Yeah.
how you can change all of that and then bringing it down to one person. It's a fascinating transition. Didn't realize that, Bill. I love that. And you strive to help people, Elisa says. You're striving to help people. So Lisa MG says, is there anything you could leave us with to make us a better person? Great question, Lisa. Like a tip for everybody.
Well, as it relates to hypnosis, I'm happy to say that I was pleasantly surprised by the fact that a lot of people had gotten rid of their skepticism of something like
Mhm.
hypnosis. And if I were to leave you with anything, it would be regarding hypnosis. It's not a flaw in your character if you need hypnosis. It's not a failing on your part. It's the idea that in this day and age, with everything we talked about, all the new stressors, all the old stressors, everybody has relationship problems and
Right.
unemployment and everything that you would have, throughout history. Um, these days, the skepticism is less and less, and people are being a little more open. And so,
Mm,
anybody who needs this type of work, it's really more along the lines of just saying, "Hey, look, I'm just a regular guy. I'm just John Q. Public. I need to fill in a couple of gaps here. I need a little help with this. It's not anything to be ashamed of. It's not anything to be embarrassed of." Uh, as I was saying earlier, if you have something like IBS, that's not necessarily something you want to talk about in a
right.
lot of places. It's uncomfortable. But to leave you with something would be to say that there's plenty of people who are willing to help you. It doesn't have to be a huge issue, but it can be a huge result. You could have incredible results from this kind of work. And I've seen it
life
myself.
changing. And
Yeah,
I'm going to
absolutely.
go with this last remark. David Vigiano, who I just adore. Hi, David. He says, I've always wanted to be hypnotized, but my big fear is being that vulnerable. Is that a common feeling? And what can I do to get over that?
So I had this conversation 45 minutes before I came on the air with you. And this is so good. This is making me feel validated because I'm
Good.
actually having answers to questions that I wouldn't have that I wouldn't have had 10 years ago. Everybody, almost everybody has the fear of being vulnerable. And the flip side of it is almost everybody feels great as soon as they become vulnerable because they finally got it off their chest. It's kind of that secret you've been holding. It's the rock you've been carrying, you get to that breaking point where you're cleansing when you do this. You have a question. You're searching for the answer. You get part of the answer. Sometimes you get all the answer. And it only comes from being vulnerable. It only comes from reaching down deep. And in this case, the reaching down deep is just to open up and let us kind of take a walk with you in your subconscious and change your, kind of change your viewpoint.
Wow. And Bill, thank you so much for all of this. All of this is wonderful. How can people reach you for sessions?
Sure. Well, you can go right to my website. It's right on the screen there. It's my initials, which is bchypno.com. You can also reach the same website by going to billcinquehypnotist.com. I just thought that was a lot of letters, so I'd give you two choices. But bchypno.com, there's my website. It'll show you some testimonials. It'll give you some articles.
Great website, everybody.
And it gives you my contact, my email. It also gives you that intake form that I was telling you about that would give you the client agreement and assessment forms. And
Great.
Sure, just give me a holler.
Well, I'm sure people out there will be. Gretchen White says, please come visit me again. Well, we're going to have you back with more stories about that.
Open.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. And, by the way, everybody, if you go back to my archives on bothsidesnowtv.com, Both Sides Now TV, and you put in Bill Cinque, you will see he was on our show a couple of times. I mean, really interesting backstory that he has. I think you guys would love to watch that. But everybody's saying, thank you so much. What a great opportunity, Bill, to explore this. Oh, Bill's incredible, Charmaine. I mean, really, everybody should get a chance to have some sessions with Bill. I think it would be life-changing, and it will be really interesting for your psyche to do this. My goodness, everybody's saying, thank you, Bill. How sweet is this? Lovely guest,
fantastic.
Great show. See, how great is this? Even your brother likes it.
Well, if you notice, he mentioned you, not me. Right? He put Kelly, great show.
That. Yeah. Notice my siblings don't even watch the show. And I also just want to mention on April 18th, I'm doing a Sunday morning event, and I'm the keynote speaker. And the topic is going to be how I became a medium. So here you go. If you have would like to join us on Spirit Sundays on April 18th. It's live on Zoom Sunday Spirit thing that Karen White, the medium Karen White, does. And so I'm going to talk about how I became a medium. So if you're interested, join us on April 18th. And on Monday's show, James and I are talking about gentleness and kindness and getting along with others. So that's going to be Monday night, everybody. And thank you so much, Bill. Good night, everybody. Thanks, Renee.
Thank you, guys, for.
You've been listening to Ask Me Anything, featuring spiritual medium and psychotherapist Kelly White.